hard-hitting interviews, sharp market insight, in-depth analysis with a critical eye on events shaping today's most important stories. Weeknights, Dobbs is back to business, going back-to-back with one of the most experienced names in business journalism, Neil Cavuto. Two trusted names, one powerful network. When it comes to covering business, these guys are all business. Only on Fox Business Network, giving you the power to prosper.
We're talking about the Federal Reserve System, and we're back with G. Edward Griffin and Mark Calabria. And we want to go to the audience here who has sat patiently, and I want to start with Nicole and your question about the Fed.
Okay. In the Weimar Republic, they flooded the economy with currency to, like, jumpstart it. How much money would have to be flooded into our economy, either in, like, dollars or percent of the GDP, to have that same situation as they had in the Weimar Republic?
The inflation rates you saw in Germany in the 20s were, off the charts. I mean, literally people were getting paid twice a day so that you could go to the grocery store before prices doubled. And literally you'd be there at a cup of coffee, and by the time you got your next cup of coffee, it was more expensive than the last cup of coffee. So we were talking, interest rates, inflation, double digits over the course of a day.
Well, you have Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and Zimbabwe.
You have Hungary.
So it's certainly very feasible, but we are a long ways away from that. I think worst case scenario for the United States is we're going to start to see inflation in the high single digits. Now, I think that that's important because even at a 2% rate of inflation, which the Federal Reserve tells us is price stability, at a 2% rate of inflation over 30 years, half of the value of any asset is wiped out. So, this slowly erodes over time. Now, obviously, when you get to something like 10 or 20% inflation, you're just running to stay ahead and protect the wealth you have.
Edward, do you have any point of context here on the printing of money? They're now talking seriously about printing money as a way out of this unsustainable debt.
Well, that's always been their theory. They're just talking about it more openly now. And that's, as I said a moment ago, that's their only trick. And so we can anticipate that's the trick they're going to play. But in terms of inflation, I am not quite as optimistic about the inflation rate, or as impressed by this 2% or 3% figure. I believe that the government is not telling us the truth about the true inflation rate. I think they're fixing the formula.
You think?
I don't think I'm alone in this, obviously. But what is the true rate? I believe, from what I can see, that it's pushing up to about 20% right now. Maybe not be that high, but that certainly is the rate at which gold is expanding, and historically that's always been a very accurate measure over a long period of time of true inflation. Well, how far can that go? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. All the experts will tell me, because they've digitized the money, yes, that and most of the money is sitting in banks, that these people who are trying to collapse our economy, they say the banks have the money, we want that money. What the experts will tell you is, well, no, we're not going to cause inflation because the banks have that money, and so it's not in the system. It only is a problem when it's pushed out into the system. Well, the problem is not just inflation, but if you want to pull all that money back, you have to pull it back by higher interest rates. Yes. So how high do the interest rates have to be? Let's not talk about inflation. Let's talk about I'm going in to get a loan. How high do the interest rates have to be to pull and suck all of that money back in to the Federal Reserve?
Well, you remember, during the early 80s, the prime rate got over like 21%.
Right.
And so one should start with, we are going to see higher interest rates either because of inflation and or the Fed having to raise rates to fight inflation. So
I will tell you that I talked to Art Laffer. This is 2 years ago, and I said, Art, how high do they have to be? And he said, Glenn, I'm not going to give you a number. He said, substantially higher than what we saw in the 1970s and 80s. My question to him was, how do you not stop the heart of the economy if you've got, let's just say, 25% interest rate? But nobody has an answer on that one. So how would you stop? How would you?
You throw the economy into a recession. That's what happened in the early 80s. We had a very deep, fortunately it was a relatively short recession, but it was a very deep and painful recession we had in the early 80s, and that was with a federal funds rate of just around 21%.
It only works if you have a free market system and people who are willing to experience the pain and know how to go out and start business. Back in just a second. We're just having an interesting conversation here with Morgan. How old are you, Morgan?
I'm 23.
You're 23. You just asked the question in the break. I don't have anything.
Right.
What do I do, right?
What do you do when it all comes crashing down if you don't have anything because you're just starting out?
I mean, I think you do need to be concerned. I mean, fortunately, for good or bad, you're not in as bad shape as people who are savers. I mean, the people who are really getting hit the worst by this are people who've been saving all their lives, who are near retirement. You hopefully have enough time to plan against this. You need to put yourself, I mean, the first, most immediate thing you can do is build your own human capital, because labor will always be worth something and brains will always be worth something. And hopefully they can't inflate that away. But any physical wealth is going to be something that you've got to find a way to protect yourself and hedge it. And you can look at a variety of commodities, whether it's silver or gold, or whether it's even the food stuff, or even it's land, because all of those things tend to hold their value in inflation.
And then buckle up.
Yes.
And then buckle up. Who was it? Was it Alex or Steve? Yes, Steve.
That there really is gold that backs the ETFs.
That's the electronic transfer, right, of gold. That's the gold. That's paper gold.
Yes. The operative word, I guess, here is backs. When the Federal Reserve started out in 1913, you had to have 40 cents of gold for every dollar that they issued. We're not even at 1 cent for every dollar that's issued. So in no way could you go and get gold for your dollar bills. Now, I think an important part, we talked earlier about what would make people change their mind about the Fed. I think a lot of people have forgotten that up until 1971, when Nixon took us off the international gold standard, there was an anchor that kept the dollar somewhat stable. And you really didn't see a burst of inflation in history until after that happened. So if we did nothing but went back on a gold, some sort of standard, internationally, you get a really big constraint on the Fed because of that.
Let's go back there, because Ed had a question here about the gold standard, right?
I understand there is a bill in the North Carolina House, H.R. 301, to create a state-based currency backed by gold and silver.
And Utah just passed a bill, and the governor signed it, saying we'll accept gold now or U.S. dollars. I don't know how they're going to get away with it, but I want to go there, and can you even get back to a gold standard without massive pain next? The states that want a gold standard, like Utah. Good idea, bad idea?
I think it's absolutely a great ideal. I mean, you can't trust and you can't wait on the federal government to fix this. The answer is going to come from somewhere. It'll come from the states.
And let me give you this answer. I think it's even smaller than that. The answer is going to come from you. Somebody in the audience said, well, geez, if we don't have anything, what are we going to do? Look at our pioneers. Look at the Pilgrims on the Mayflower. They had nothing. They not only survived, they thrived because they had each other and they had God. Look to somebody who actually has some answers for the answer, not the Federal Reserve. From New York, good night, America.